Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who say, I don't like these form of videos, Jason, you saw the title of the video and you clicked on it. I make informative videos every day also. But for those of you who do enjoy these and they appreciate this form of content, if you guys would click like down below to offset those three guys who run that dislike bot every day, that would be greatly appreciated. But on to the video. Someone linked me a video that Mark Bell did where he agrees with something that I have been saying for many, many, many years. And again, Mark is a very respected powerlifter and coach. So when he's saying the same thing, I think people are going to listen. And that is that you should not be doing reps for most people, for many people, on the deadlift. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of Speechcraft and let's talk about this. Now, a lot of people are going to say that's just powerlifting, not even about hypertrophy. Well, you guys need to understand, Mark comes from Westside originally, and the Westside guys are all ultra jacked with tons of hypertrophy. So that argument's not even valid when you're dealing with this particular group of people. But even the West Side guys have more or less stopped doing reps on their real deadlifts. They do singles. And when it comes to me, have you guys noticed that I don't do reps anymore? And when I was doing reps, I did full resets. And eventually I've gone to where on my heavy days, you guys see me do heavy singles. And on my speed days, I do up to 20 singles. All of my coaching clients, you guys all watch these videos. Any of you guys do rep work? All right. None of my clients do reps on their deadlifts. We do nothing but singles. Even if they're sub-maximal singles and they do a bunch of them, they do singles. None of them do doubles, triples, fives. People would say, well, why? Well, Mark broke down his own take on it, and it's not one that I've necessarily considered, but he's actually right. I've always said to guys that basically they're easier reps. When you do reps, your second and third and fourth rep are easier than your first a lot of times. So in other words, a lot of times when people are doing rep work, the first thing they notice is that the second rep and the third rep are easier than the first. Even with their 3 rep max or their 5 rep max. So why is that? Because it's an easier version. You are putting yourself into a position to where you aren't having to work as hard or recruit as many muscle fibers. Mark breaks it down really, really well. And we're not even always talking about just a straight touch and go. We're talking about the people who drop a deadlift to the floor and maintain tension on the bar. Because when you still hold on to tight tension on the bar, what happens? You've got the slack still pulled out of it. Now, that's your best case scenario for rep work. But by pulling the slack out, as he pointed, it is a partial. You are taking the hardest part of the range of motion out. Because if you're maintaining the bar bend already and guys are just barely touching the floor, they've removed a lot of the hardest part of the exercise. Because even sometimes that initial couple of inches where you are just first breaking it off the floor and pulling the slack out is actually where the most muscle fiber recruitment happens on a deadlift. And when you do it to where you're maintaining that full tension, or especially if you're just barely tapping, it is absolutely a partial. You are losing inches off the range of motion. It's an easier exercise. Now, you get a lot of guys will say, oh, well, but I can do a lot more reps when I do that, so I'm getting more training volume. But you're not getting more training volume. That's what people need to understand. If you can do more reps, it means it's easier. If it's easier, you're recruiting less muscle fibers, right? I want people to think about that for a moment. Because essentially you're using, as he pointed out, a combination of inertia and you're turning it into a partial. So if you're able to use outside inertia from the eccentric rep, kind of helping you bounce off the floor, and you're cutting out a couple inches of the hardest part of the range of motion, the fact that you're moving the weight more times, is it because you're able to do more work? No, you're doing less work. That's why you're able to move it more times. That's why you're able to move it more times. Now, from a hypertrophic perspective, it might not be a big deal because it balances out. If you reduce the weight on a bar, but you do 3 more reps, what happens? Well, you get just as much growth stimulus. So in theory, from a hypertrophic perspective, that's fine. In theory, but what about a joint angle specificity and a neuromuscular efficiency perspective? It is going to carry over less. You aren't going to get as strong as quickly as you could, and you're going to suck more at maxes. You're going to suck at maxes. Because a max is a first rep. You're not practicing first reps. And I'm not saying specificity of training is everything, because it isn't. But what you are doing is you're treating the deadlift like a supplemental lift, and it's no longer a deadlift. You've turned it into an accessory movement. You are no longer actually doing deadlifts at that point. So you're going to actually need to, why don't you just pick something? Yeah, what I guess I would say to people is that if you just want a supplemental lift for the deadlift, pick one that's easier to recover from. Do a Romanian deadlift, do a good morning. Why do a bouncing touch and go deadlift? It injures you. Almost every single person ever in history who has damaged their back doing a deadlift, it has been doing touch and go deadlifts. It is dangerous, it's counterproductive, and as Mark pointed out, he broke down the whole thing with the partial. And again, I hadn't thought about that. I've always thought about it as the inertia part, and one of the guys that he's talking with in the video said, well, I've always thought of it as inertia, and that's why. And as Mark pointed out, well, it's a combination of the two. It's inertia combined with a reduced range of motion. It's a partial. And I mean, as I've said before, it is a partial at the hardest part of the exercise. It's partial at the hardest part of the exercise. I mean, how do you make any exercise easier? Remove the hardest inch of it? But if we remove the hardest inch of an exercise, we have less tension on the muscles. Because that's what people need to remember too. When we're talking about stimulating muscles, we're talking about tension. When we talk about increasing weight, we increase weight on a bar for as far as training stimulus. Now, obviously, when we're at a powerlifting meet, we're trying to increase the weight. We're trying to move as much weight as possible. That's very different from, are we getting a training response? Generally, we add weight to a bar to get more tension on a muscle from the training side, right? Usually people can grasp that. But if you're reducing the range of motion to where you take the part of the lift to where the most tension is placed on the muscle and you remove it, we've reduced tension. And I'll make this one that people can understand. The pecs, perfect example. There's more tension on the pec at the bottom with the same weight than there is at the top. And that's even if you use a cable. It's not just with a barbell, because people say, oh, because of, the free weight. Even if you used a cable or a machine, it's the same. There is more tension on the pectoral at the bottom at the stretch. So if you remove the bottom couple inches of a bench press, you can usually lift more weight. And it's not because you're able to lift more weight because you're stronger. It's because the muscle is put in a situation where there's less tension on the muscle. You've removed the most disadvantaged angle. Therefore, the muscle doesn't have to work as hard to get the weight started. It's the same thing on the deadlift. You've removed the most difficult part of the exercise. And if you're doing that, you're reducing tension on the muscles. Now then we come over to the training effect. What's happened here? We've reduced the training effect. Then when we come over to the specificity of training, yes, a lot of other exercises can train the deadlift, and we all understand that. Anything that builds muscle through a lot of the different muscles involved with the deadlift will get you stronger at the deadlift. Rows will get you stronger at deadlifts. Romanian deadlifts will get you stronger at deadlifts. Good mornings will get you stronger at deadlifts. A glute ham raise will. A squat, all of these things will make you stronger at deadlifts. But you're still going to need to get practice in on the exercise. Yeah, you're going to have to practice the exercise heavy to still get good at it. And if you're doing touch and go work, you're no longer doing a deadlift. Or if you're not fully resetting. So normally I've always told people to completely reset. Like if you guys watched me when I did used to do rep work, I would still hold on to the bar, but I would completely reset my hips and pull the slack out of the bar every time on each rep. But what Mark is teaching is to actually have guys reach up and turn loose of the bar and then re-grip the bar even if they're going to do a triple. So it essentially turns into 3 very close together singles. In its own way, that's not a lot different from what I'm doing these days, where I do up to 20 singles with anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds between. So it takes me up to 20 minutes to do those 20 singles. But that's how I do it, and that's actually how I program for my clients and stuff these days. But by that same token, if someone wanted to do true rep work, I'm going to lean in the direction and say, I think what Mark is showing here is probably better than just resetting. We're talking about a full reset where you turn loose of the bar, re-grip the bar, and essentially treat it as 3 separate deadlifts, even if they're 10 seconds apart. Right? It's 3 separate deadlifts. And that is really the way to train the deadlift. Now, people who will say, but aren't you going to lose hypertrophy from that? Well, number one, we're probably not doing a conventional deadlift as a primary hypertrophy exercise for a non-novice. But number two, no, because the continual tension myth is a bodybuilder myth. It's not based on real physiology. There's actually no truth to it. It's completely irrelevant. Continual tension itself has no hypertrophic benefits. I'm not saying you won't grow if you do it. I'm saying it's completely irrelevant if you do it. It will not affect your muscle growth positively or negatively. It is about total muscle fiber recruitment, fatigue, everything else. That's what actually matters. So in theory, yes, you would gain just as much muscle even on a bench press if you're doing sets at 10 if you rack the weight and unracked it every single rep. So if you did it 10 times and you re-rack the weight 10 times on a 10 rep set and you did the same weight same rate of perceived exertion, you would probably get the same response. You get the same response. That continual tension is completely irrelevant. But when it comes to something like a deadlift, practicing that first rep matters. And what you're doing when you split it up the way he does it is you're doing 3 first reps again. And that has perfect carryover. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.